Welcome back to Sleepless historian Salavora. Tonight, we leave behind the windswept deserts of the people of Ad and travel forward into another forgotten chapter of ancient Arabia. A chapter filled with mystery. A chapter written into stone. A chapter that begins with a civilization so skilled that they carved entire homes into the sides of mountains. For centuries, travelers crossing the Arabian deserts looked upon these enormous stone structures and wondered. Who built them? What kind of people lived here? Why did they disappear? And why does their story continue to echo through religious history thousands of years later? Tonight, we begin the story of Prophet Salih, A.S., and the mysterious nation known as the Mud. So dim the lights. Get comfortable. And let us travel back into the distant past. The Hook. Imagine standing in the middle of an ancient desert. The sun is setting. The sky glows orange and gold. Towering cliffs rise from the earth around you. As shadows stretch across the landscape, you suddenly notice something unusual. Doorways. Windows. Entire homes carved directly into solid rock. Not one or two. Hundreds. An entire city hidden within the mountains. No smoke rises from the houses. No voices fill the streets. No animals wander through the valleys. Only silence remains. A silence that has lasted for centuries. What happened here? Who were these people? And why did one of the most advanced civilizations in ancient Arabia vanish from history? The answer begins with a nation called the Mud. A world after the fall of Ad. Long before the rise of modern cities. Long before nations drew borders across maps. Long before the empires of Rome, Persia, and Byzantium dominated the world. Ancient Arabia was home to countless tribes and civilizations. Some flourished. Some disappeared. Some left only faint traces behind. Among these forgotten nations was the Mud. Islamic tradition teaches that the people of the Mud came after the people of Ad. The fall of Ad had become a warning throughout Arabia. Stories about the mighty civilization destroyed by divine punishment spread from tribe to tribe. Parents told their children. Travelers shared the tale beside campfires. Merchants carried the story along trade routes. The lesson seemed clear. Power alone could not protect a nation. Yet as generations passed, many people forgot. Human beings often learn from history. But they also have a habit of repeating it. The harsh beauty of ancient Arabia. To understand the Mud, we must first understand their world. Ancient Arabia was a land of extremes. Burning heat during the day. Cold nights beneath endless stars. Towering mountains. Rocky valleys. Vast deserts stretching beyond the horizon. Life was never easy. Water was precious. Food required effort. Survival demanded intelligence and determination. The environment shaped the people. Those who lived here learned resilience. They learned patience. They learned how to adapt. And over time, some communities became remarkably successful. The Mud was one of them. A civilization of builders. Many ancient civilizations are remembered for what they built. Egypt built pyramids. Mesopotamia built great cities. Rome built roads and aqueducts. The Mud became famous for something unique. They carved their homes directly into mountains. Imagine the effort required. No modern machines. No electric tools. Only human skill. Human determination. And countless hours of labor. Stone by stone. Wall by wall. Room by room. They transformed mountains into cities. Their homes were strong. Beautiful. And designed to endure. The people of the mud looked at these structures with pride. And perhaps that pride would eventually become part of their downfall. The Valley of Stone. Many historians associate the mud with regions in northwestern Arabia. One location often linked to their story is an area known today as Mada'in Salih, near the modern city of Al-Ula in Saudi Arabia. While the surviving rock-cut structures visible today are largely associated with the later Nabatean civilization, the region has long been connected to traditions about the mud. Ancient travelers wrote about mysterious ruins in the area. Generations passed down stories about forgotten people who once lived among the rocks. The landscape itself seemed to preserve memories. Towering cliffs. Hidden valleys. Stone facades carved into mountains. Even today, the region feels like a place suspended between history and legend. A prosperous nation. The people of the mud were not poor wanderers. They possessed resources. They possessed skills. They possessed knowledge. They developed settlements. Managed trade. Built homes. Organized communities. Their prosperity made them confident. And confidence is not always a bad thing. Confidence can inspire progress. Confidence can encourage achievement. But confidence becomes dangerous when it transforms into arrogance. History shows this pattern again and again. A civilization succeeds. It grows stronger. It becomes comfortable. And then it begins believing that success will last forever. The human desire for permanence. One thing unites people across all generations. The desire to leave something behind. Humans build monuments because they want to be remembered. They construct cities because they want permanence. They create art, literature, and architecture because they hope their achievements will survive them. The people of the mud were no different. Their homes carved into mountains reflected a dream. A dream that their civilization would endure. A dream that future generations would look upon their accomplishments with admiration. In some ways, they succeeded. Thousands of years later, people still speak about them. But not for the reasons they expected. The memory of Ad. The shadow of Ad still lingered over Arabia. The story of the destroyed civilization had become part of regional memory. Some elders warned younger generations. Remember what happened to those before us. But warnings often lose power over time. As years pass, people begin believing. That happened to them. It could never happen to us. The people of the mud gradually developed the same confidence that once characterized Ad. The same belief in their strength. The same trust in their achievements. The same feeling of security. And history was preparing to test them. The spiritual condition of the mud. Like many societies throughout history, the people of the mud practiced forms of idol worship. They created objects of devotion. They followed traditions passed down from previous generations. Many never questioned the beliefs they inherited. For them, these practices felt normal. Natural. Ancient. But over time, traditions can become so familiar that people stop asking whether they are true. And whenever societies drift far from guidance, prophets are sent. Not to seek power. Not to gain wealth. But to remind people of the truth. Soon, a messenger would arise from among the mud. Someone they already knew. Someone who spoke their language. Someone who understood their culture. A man named Salih, a.s. A child growing among the mountains. Long before he became a prophet, Salih, a.s., lived among his people. He walked the same valleys. Saw the same mountains. Observed the same society. He understood their strengths. Their talents. Their ambitions. And their flaws. At this point in our story, nobody yet knew what role he would play in history. To most people, he was simply a member of the community. A man growing up among the stone cities of the mud. But destiny was preparing something greater. A mission that would change everything. The calm before the turning point. The people of the mud continued their lives. Builders carved stone. Merchants traveled trade routes. Families gathered in their homes. Children played beneath towering cliffs. Life seemed stable. Secure. Predictable. Yet history often changes when people least expect it. The greatest turning points rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly. One conversation. One message. One moment. And everything begins to change. For the mud, that moment was approaching. A prophet would soon rise among them. A message would soon challenge their beliefs. And a miracle unlike anything they had ever witnessed would eventually appear before their eyes. But first, the story of Salih, A.S., had to begin. A quiet beginning. Every great story in history begins long before the world notices. Before kings rise to power. Before cities fall. Before civilizations disappear. There is always a quiet beginning. The story of Prophet Salih, A.S., was no different. Long before he became a prophet, he was simply known as Salih. A man who lived among the people of the mud. A familiar face in a familiar place. He walked the same rocky paths as everyone else. He drank from the same wells. He witnessed the same magnificent cliffs carved into homes by generations of skilled craftsmen. Nothing about his daily life appeared unusual. Yet Allah had already chosen him for a purpose that would one day change the course of his nation's history. Growing up among the mountains. Imagine waking each morning beneath towering sandstone cliffs. As the first rays of sunlight touched the mountains, the carved facades of Thamud's homes glowed with shades of gold, amber, and crimson. The city itself seemed to emerge from the rocks. Children laughed in narrow stone streets. Merchants opened their shops. Stonecutters began another day's work, their chisels echoing through the valleys. Camels moved slowly along dusty roads carrying goods from distant lands. The smell of bread baking in clay ovens drifted through the cool morning air. For the people of the mud, this was ordinary life. For Salih, it was the world he would one day be sent to change. A society at the height of its power. The people of the mud admired strength. Not only physical strength. They admired intelligence. Engineering. Architecture. Leadership. Their civilization had reached remarkable heights. Their homes were unlike anything seen in many neighboring regions. Entire families lived inside beautifully carved chambers protected by solid mountains. They believed these homes would survive generations. Many probably imagined that nothing could threaten such magnificent structures. Success surrounded them. Comfort became normal. And when comfort lasts long enough, people often forget how fragile it truly is. Salih's character. Although the Quran gives only a brief account of Salih's early life, it presents something very important. He was one of them. He belonged to the mud. He was not a stranger. He was not an outsider. His people knew his honesty. They knew his manners. They trusted his judgment. Many classical Muslim scholars explain that before prophethood, Salih, A.S., enjoyed respect among his people because of his upright character. He was known for integrity, for wisdom, for calmness, for fairness. No one could accuse him of seeking personal gain. This would later make their rejection of him even more tragic. The beauty of character. History often celebrates warriors, kings, conquerors, But the Quran repeatedly highlights something different. Character. Truthfulness. Patience. Humility. The greatest people in history were not always the strongest. Often, they were the most sincere. Salih, A.S., possessed qualities that could not be measured with wealth or power. He carried honesty in a society that increasingly admired status. He carried humility in a civilization becoming proud. These qualities prepared him for the responsibility that was about to come. When a nation forgets its purpose. Prosperity is one of life's greatest blessings. But prosperity also carries hidden dangers. When people struggle, they usually remember their dependence upon Allah. When water is scarce, every drop becomes precious. When food is limited, every meal becomes a gift. When life becomes comfortable, gratitude sometimes fades. The people of the mud had reached that point. Their buildings became larger. Their wealth increased. Trade flourished. But alongside material success, spiritual awareness slowly declined. Idols became central to their religious life. Traditions replaced sincere reflection. Many people worshipped what their ancestors had worshipped without asking why. The heart of the nation was changing. The mission begins. Then came the moment that transformed Salih's life forever. Allah chose him as a messenger. The Quran does not describe the exact circumstances of this moment. Instead, it focuses on the mission itself. Salih, A.S., was commanded to call his people toward one simple truth. Worship Allah alone. Abandon false gods. Seek forgiveness. Live with righteousness. Remember the one who created you. The message was simple. But simplicity often challenges people more than complexity. The first words. Imagine the first time Salih stood before his people as a prophet. Many recognized him immediately. There stood the same honest man they had known for years. The same trustworthy member of their community. But now his words carried a different authority. My people. Those two words mattered. He did not begin by insulting them. He did not speak with hatred. He addressed them as his own people. Because they were. He loved them. He wanted good for them. Every prophet first desired guidance for those closest to him. The core of the message. The Quran summarizes Salih's call in several chapters. Its central theme remains consistent. O my people, worship Allah, you have no deity other than Him. Everything else flowed from this foundation. If people recognized Allah as their creator, then gratitude would follow. Justice would follow. Humility would follow. Compassion would follow. The external problems within society were connected to a deeper spiritual problem. The heart had drifted away from its creator. A familiar voice, an unfamiliar message. At first, many listened carefully. Salih was respected. People expected wisdom from him. Perhaps some assumed he was simply offering moral advice. But as his message became clearer, discomfort spread. He was not merely encouraging kindness. He was asking them to abandon practices their families had followed for generations. He challenged the idols that had become symbols of tradition. He questioned beliefs deeply rooted within society. And whenever deeply rooted ideas are challenged, resistance often follows. The people's surprise. The Quran records their reaction. In essence, they expressed amazement. They said that before this message, they had placed great hope in Salih. He had been someone they admired. Someone they trusted. Now they wondered. How could the very man they respected ask them to leave the religion of their ancestors? This is one of history's recurring tragedies. Sometimes people admire honesty. Until honesty challenges them. The weight of tradition. Tradition has tremendous power. It connects families, communities, generations. Many traditions are beautiful and beneficial. But traditions should never replace truth. The people of the mud believed that because their ancestors followed certain practices, those practices must be correct. Salih gently invited them to think, to reflect, to question. Not everything inherited is automatically true. Every generation has a responsibility to seek guidance sincerely. The leaders begin to worry. The influential leaders of the mud observed Salih carefully. At first, they may not have viewed him as a serious threat. But his words began reaching hearts. Some people listened thoughtfully. Others became curious. A few quietly accepted his message. The leaders recognized something important. Ideas spread. Truth travels. A sincere message cannot always be contained. This worried them. Because power often depends upon controlling ideas. The believers. The Quran tells us that a group believed in Salih. They were not necessarily wealthy. Nor were they necessarily powerful. Faith has never depended on social status. Throughout prophetic history, sincere believers often came from different backgrounds. Some were respected. Some were ordinary. But they shared one quality. Their hearts remained open. They listened. They reflected. And they believed. The growing divide. As days passed, the mud slowly divided into two groups. One group accepted the message. The other rejected it. Families began discussing Salih at evening meals. Merchants debated his teachings in marketplaces. Travelers carried news of this unusual preacher to neighboring tribes. The entire civilization entered a period of quiet tension. Nothing dramatic had happened yet. No miracle had appeared. No punishment had come. Only words. Simple words. But history has often been changed by words long before it is changed by events. The patience of a prophet. Salih understood that changing hearts requires patience. He did not demand instant results. He continued speaking with kindness. He answered questions. He invited reflection. He reminded people of Allah's blessings. Every mountain around them. Every well that sustained them. Every harvest. Every child. Every breath. These were signs. Not accidents. Not gifts from idols. But blessings from the Creator. A civilization at a crossroads. Without realizing it, the people of the mud had reached one of the most important moments in their history. Before them stood two paths. One led toward humility. The other toward pride. One required admitting they might be wrong. The other required defending old beliefs at any cost. History would soon reveal which path they chose. And Allah would soon grant them a sign unlike anything they had ever imagined. A miracle that would leave no room for doubt. A miracle connected not to gold. Not to armies. Not to mountains. But to a single she-camel. The calm before the confrontation. For many weeks, perhaps even months, life in the valley of the mud continued almost as it always had. The stonecutters still climbed the cliffs before sunrise. The sharp rhythm of iron against sandstone echoed through the valleys. Merchants prepared their caravans before dawn. Children chased one another through streets carved into the mountainsides. Shepherds guided their flocks across dry plains where patches of green appeared only after rare rainfall. From a distance, nothing seemed different. The magnificent city still stood proudly beneath towering cliffs. The markets remained busy. The wells continued supplying water. The carved homes still reflected the brilliance of their builders. Yet beneath this ordinary routine, something invisible was changing. Conversations had become divided. Families argued quietly after sunset. Neighbors no longer agreed about the future. One simple question now lingered over every gathering. Was Salih truly a messenger sent by Allah? A message that refused to disappear. The leaders of the mud had expected Salih's words to fade. Perhaps they believed people would lose interest. Perhaps they assumed this new message would disappear like so many passing ideas. Instead, the opposite happened. Every day, more people discussed him. Some rejected him immediately. Others remained uncertain. A small but growing number quietly believed. The message spread because it touched something deep within the human heart. It asked people to reflect. To question. To remember. No army carried this message. No wealth promoted it. It moved only through sincere conversation. History has shown that truthful ideas often travel farther than powerful armies. The Council of the Chiefs. The most influential men of the mud gathered inside one of their great stone halls. The room itself reflected the pride of their civilization. Massive columns supported high ceilings carved directly into the mountain. Oil lamps flickered against polished sandstone walls. The air carried the scent of burning incense. Around them sat tribal elders. Merchants. Landowners. Military leaders. Men whose opinions shaped the future of the nation. One elder finally spoke. If Salih continues, he said, our people will stop honoring the traditions of our ancestors. Another replied, our fathers worshipped these idols. Their fathers did the same. Will we abandon generations of tradition because of one man? A third remained silent for a long moment before saying, if we ignore him completely, more people may follow him. If we oppose him openly, we may only make him stronger. The council had reached a difficult position. They did not know how to stop a message built upon conviction rather than force. The people's expectations. Many ordinary people watched these events with curiosity. Some admired Salih's courage. Others considered him dangerous. Many simply waited. Human nature often hesitates between certainty and doubt. People wanted proof. Something undeniable. Something impossible to explain. Even those who secretly believed wondered if Allah would provide a visible sign. Little did they know that such a sign was about to appear. The demand for a miracle. Eventually, the chiefs confronted Salih. Their request was not sincere. It was intended as a challenge. According to the Quranic account, they demanded a miraculous sign. Classical Islamic narrations describe that they pointed toward a great rock or mountain and demanded that an extraordinary she-camel emerge from it, a living miracle that no human being could produce. Their reasoning was simple. If your Lord truly sent you, they implied, then show us something impossible. It was not a humble request for guidance. It was a test they believed could never be answered. Many of them smiled confidently. They expected Salih to fail. The silence before the miracle. Imagine the entire valley gathering. Thousands of eyes fixed upon a massive rock formation. The desert wind slowed. Even the animals seemed unusually quiet. Children stood beside their parents. Merchants left their stalls. Workers stopped carving stone. The entire city held its breath. Salih, did not call upon his own strength. He did not claim personal power. He turned completely toward Allah. Because prophets perform no miracles by themselves. Every miracle comes only by the permission and power of Allah. The miracle appears. The Quran confirms that Allah granted Salih a miraculous sign. Classical Islamic scholars described this sign as the miraculous appearance of a magnificent she-camel. Many traditional narrations state that she emerged from solid rock by Allah's command. The Quran itself emphasizes the miracle without describing every physical detail of how it occurred. The valley fell into complete silence. Before them stood something beyond human explanation. A living creature. Healthy. Powerful. Created through Allah's will. The challenge they believed impossible had been answered. Not by human ability, but by divine command. The astonishment of the crowd. For several long moments, nobody spoke. Some stared in disbelief. Others stepped backward. Even the strongest skeptics struggled to explain what they had witnessed. The impossible had become reality. This was not magic. Not illusion. Not deception. It was a sign. Exactly what they had demanded. The people who had insisted, "Show us a miracle," now stood face to face with one. A test, not a performance. Many people misunderstand miracles. They imagine miracles exist merely to amaze. But in the Quran, miracles are never entertainment. They are tests. Opportunities. Mercy. The miracle of the she-camel carried responsibility. Once a clear sign had been shown, every person now faced a choice. Would they believe? Or would they search for excuses? Miracles can open the eyes. But only willing hearts can accept what the eyes have seen. The command regarding the camel. Along with the miracle came instructions. The she-camel belonged to Allah. She was not ordinary livestock. She was a sacred sign. According to the Quran, Salih instructed his people. Leave the she-camel unharmed. Allow her to drink from the well on her appointed day. Do not interfere with her. Do not harm her. This command became a test of obedience. Not because Allah needed the camel, but because people needed to demonstrate whether they would submit to truth. Sharing the water. Water was precious in Arabia. Every well meant survival. The Quran explains that there was to be an arrangement concerning access to water. The she-camel had her designated turn. The people had theirs. Some classical commentators describe how the miraculous camel drank enormous amounts of water, yet in return, she produced abundant milk sufficient for many people. Whether one focuses on the Quranic account or the classical narrations, the essential lesson remains the same. Allah's blessings often arrive together with responsibility. The beginning of envy. At first, some accepted the miracle. Others remained uncertain. But among the powerful leaders, another emotion slowly appeared. Envy. The miracle strengthened Salih's position. People respected him more. His followers increased. The authority of the traditional leaders seemed weaker than before. Pride whispered dangerous thoughts into their hearts. If this continues, we may lose our influence. History has often shown that pride fears truth more than falsehood. Because truth demands humility. A miracle seen every day. Unlike many miracles witnessed only once, the she-camel remained among them. Each day became another reminder. Children saw her. Travelers saw her. Shepherds saw her crossing the valleys. Her very existence challenged disbelief. Every sunrise offered another opportunity for reflection. Every sunset offered another chance to repent. Allah was giving the people time. Time to think. Time to change. Time to return. Divine mercy often arrives long before divine judgment. The hearts begin to divide. The miracle did not unite the people. Instead, it revealed what already existed inside them. The sincere became more certain. The arrogant became more stubborn. This is one of the profound patterns found throughout the stories of the prophets. The same truth softens one heart and hardens another. The difference lies not in the message, but in the heart that receives it. The valley at sunset. As evening descended over the mud, the sandstone cliffs glowed with deep shades of crimson. The miraculous She-Camel rested peacefully near the valley. Children watched her from a respectful distance. Believers thanked Allah for the sign they had witnessed. But somewhere in the gathering darkness, several influential men met quietly. They were no longer discussing whether the miracle had happened. They knew it had. Now they discussed something far more dangerous. How could they stop its influence? And in that secret conversation, the seeds of one of history's greatest tragedies were planted. The valley wakes to a miracle. Morning returned to the valley of the mud. The first light of dawn painted the towering sandstone cliffs in shades of soft gold and amber. The cool desert air drifted gently through the narrow streets carved into the mountains. Stone doors opened one by one. Families stepped outside. Children rubbed sleep from their eyes. Merchants arranged baskets of dates, woven cloth, pottery, and fragrant spices. Blacksmiths prepared their tools. Stonecutters climbed toward unfinished homes carved into the cliffs. Everything appeared ordinary. Yet nothing was ordinary anymore. The miraculous She-Camel had become part of everyday life. Every sunrise reminded the people of the sign Allah had placed before them. Every evening ended with the same question lingering in their hearts. Would they accept the truth, or continue resisting it? The camel that belonged to Allah. Salih, A.S., continually reminded his people that this was not simply an unusual animal. It was Naqatullah, the She-Camel of Allah. This title did not mean Allah needed the camel. Rather, it honored the animal as a miracle directly connected to his command. Throughout the Quran, certain things are specially associated with Allah as a mark of honor. The sacred house in Mecca is called the House of Allah. Some servants are honored as servants of Allah. Likewise, this She-Camel became a sacred sign. It represented a covenant, a test, a reminder. Its presence declared that Allah had answered the challenge of the mud. No one could honestly claim they had received no evidence. A daily reminder. Unlike lightning that flashes for only a moment. Unlike thunder that disappears within seconds. The miracle remained visible every day. Imagine walking through the valley each morning. There she was. Moving peacefully between the cliffs. Resting beneath rocky ledges during the hottest hours. Walking calmly toward the well on the day appointed for her. Children watched with amazement. Visitors asked questions. Travelers carried stories to distant tribes. The miracle became impossible to ignore. It did not shout. It simply existed. Sometimes the strongest proof is not loud. It is constant. The water of the valley. Water was life. Without it, no city could survive. Every well represented survival itself. The Quran explains that the water was to be shared. The She-Camel had her appointed turn. The people had theirs. This arrangement required patience. It required trust. Most importantly, it required obedience. For some people, this was not difficult. For others, it became deeply frustrating. Pride often resists even small acts of submission. The blessing of milk. Classical Islamic narrations describe that the miraculous camel produced abundant milk. Many families benefited. Those who once struggled to obtain nourishment found unexpected provision. Children drank. The elderly were strengthened. Travelers spoke about the extraordinary generosity connected with this animal. Whether rich or poor, people witnessed blessings unlike anything they had known before. It was another reminder that Allah provides in ways beyond human expectation. Yet blessings alone do not always change hearts. Sometimes they reveal what already exists inside them. Children without prejudice. Among those most fascinated by the She-Camel were the children. Children carry fewer prejudices than adults. They do not worry about status. They do not defend traditions simply because they are old. They simply observe. Many stood quietly watching the majestic animal move through the valley. To them, she was beautiful, peaceful, gentle. Some smiled whenever she appeared. Some followed at a respectful distance. Children often recognize wonder before adults allow themselves to. The elders remember. Not every elder rejected Salih, as. Some older members of the mud quietly reflected upon what they had seen. They remembered stories passed down through generations. Stories about the people of Ad. Stories of forgotten civilizations. Stories of prophets sent to warn proud nations. A few whispered to one another. What if this is true? What if Allah is giving us another chance? Age sometimes brings wisdom. Experience teaches that certainty should never become arrogance. The proud chiefs grow uneasy. Meanwhile, the tribal leaders watched events unfold with increasing concern. Every day the camel remained alive. Salih's credibility grew stronger. Every family that accepted his message represented a loss of influence for those who ruled through tradition and social power. Their concern was no longer theological. It became political. Power often fears anything it cannot control. Truth cannot be bought. It cannot be silenced by wealth. It cannot be erased by titles. This frightened them. The quiet conversations. At first, the leaders spoke cautiously. They met inside cool stone chambers carved deep within the mountains. Oil lamps flickered against smooth sandstone walls. Their voices remained low. One leader asked, "How long can this continue?" Another replied, "If more people believe Salih, they will stop following us." A third remained silent before finally saying, "The camel is the reason." Everyone understood. As long as the miracle remained before the people, denying Salih became increasingly difficult. Faith and arrogance walked different roads. The believers saw the camel and thanked Allah. The arrogant saw the camel and felt threatened. The miracle itself had not changed. Only the hearts observing it were different. This is one of the deepest lessons found throughout the Quran. The same sign can produce opposite reactions. One heart becomes softer. Another becomes harder. Truth reveals character. It does not create it. The test was never about the camel. Many readers assumed the story centers upon an animal. In reality, the camel was never the true subject. The real subject was obedience. Would people submit to Allah even when His command required patience? Would they respect something they did not fully understand? Would they control their pride? The camel simply became the measure through which those questions were answered. Allah already knew what was inside every heart. The test existed so the people themselves would reveal their choices. Whispers in the marketplace. As days became weeks, conversations filled the marketplace. Some merchants openly supported Salih. Others defended the old religion. Some refused to discuss the matter entirely. Families argued over evening meals. Brothers disagreed with brothers. Friends slowly drifted apart. The greatest divisions rarely begin with violence. They begin with ideas. Ideas reshape hearts. Hearts reshape societies. The beauty of patience. Through all of this, Salih, a.s., remained remarkably patient. He never called for revenge. He never demanded authority. He continued inviting people with wisdom. Every morning brought another opportunity. Every sunset offered another chance for repentance. He understood something profound. Guidance belongs to Allah. The duty of a messenger is simply to deliver the message faithfully. Nothing more. Nothing less. A secret meeting beneath the stars. One evening, after darkness covered the valley, several influential men gathered outside the city. The stars stretched endlessly above them. The desert wind carried only whispers. No servants accompanied them. No crowds watched. They wanted privacy. One of them finally broke the silence. This camel must disappear. The others looked at one another. No one answered immediately. Because everyone understood the weight of those words. This was no longer about disagreement. This was becoming rebellion against a sign sent by Allah. Another man spoke quietly. If the camel is gone, the people will forget. But history has often shown the opposite. Destroying evidence rarely destroys the truth. Sometimes it seals destiny. The women of the mud. Classical Islamic historical narrations mention that certain influential individuals, including some prominent women connected to powerful families, encouraged opposition to Salih, as, and played a role in motivating those who would later attack the She-Camel. However, the Quran itself does not identify these individuals by name or describe their personal roles in detail. These narrations remind us of an important principle. Righteousness and corruption are never limited to one gender, tribe, or social class. Every individual carries personal responsibility before Allah. Every choice matters. Every heart chooses its own path. The final opportunity. Even now. Nothing irreversible had happened. The camel still walked peacefully through the valley. Salih still invited his people toward forgiveness. Allah's mercy remained open. The doors of repentance had not closed. History often remembers the moment of destruction. But before every judgment in the Quran comes countless opportunities for mercy. Warning after warning. Reminder after reminder. Sign after sign. Allah never wrongs his servants. People choose their own direction. The valley sleeps. Night settled gently over the mud. The carved homes disappeared into darkness. Only scattered lamps glowed within the mountain city. The miraculous She-Camel rested quietly beneath the cliffs. The believers slept with peaceful hearts. The conspirators remained awake. Planning. Whispering. Convincing themselves that removing one animal would solve everything. They did not yet understand. They were not preparing to kill a camel. They were preparing to challenge the command of Allah himself. And once that line is crossed, history never remains the same. The last days of peace. There are moments in history when the world appears perfectly ordinary. The sun still rises. Merchants still bargain in crowded marketplaces. Children still laugh in the streets. Animals still graze peacefully beneath the open sky. Nothing seems unusual. Yet hidden beneath the surface, a single decision is quietly moving an entire civilization toward its destiny. The people of the mud had reached such a moment. The miraculous She-Camel still wandered peacefully through the valley. Salih, as, continued inviting his people with patience. The believers remained hopeful. Even now, the doors of repentance were still open. No punishment had come. No catastrophe had begun. Allah was still giving them time. One more day. One more opportunity. One more chance to return. A nation divided. The valley no longer felt united. Where neighbors had once spoken only about harvests, trade, and family, their conversations were now filled with difficult questions. Some quietly accepted Salih's message. Others defended the religion of their ancestors. Some remained uncertain, waiting to see what would happen next. The greatest conflicts often begin long before weapons appear. They begin inside hearts. Inside conversations. Inside choices that seem small at first. Every civilization eventually reaches moments when truth demands a decision. The mud had arrived at that moment. The Quran mentions 9 men. The Quran gives us an important detail not found in many other stories. In Surah An-Naml, Allah tells us that within the city were 9 men who spread corruption in the land and refused to reform. The Quran does not describe them as ordinary citizens. Nor does it present them as misunderstood individuals. Instead, they are introduced as people whose actions consistently spread corruption. They possessed influence. They possessed confidence. But they used those gifts to lead others away from righteousness. History remembers many powerful people. Yet true greatness is never measured by influence alone. It is measured by how influence is used. The nature of corruption. Corruption rarely begins with dramatic crimes. More often, it begins quietly. A small lie. A dishonest decision. A selfish act defended as necessary. Over time, repeated wrongdoing becomes normal. Conscience grows weaker. The unusual becomes ordinary. The unacceptable becomes acceptable. These 9 men had reached that point. Their hearts no longer recognized the danger of opposing a clear sign from Allah. The secret gathering. As darkness settled over the mountains, the 9 conspirators gathered in a secluded place beyond the sight of the city. The stars stretched across the desert sky like countless lanterns. The wind moved softly through the rocky valleys. No celebration filled the night. No music echoed from the stone homes. Only quiet voices discussing a dangerous plan. One man broke the silence. As long as the camel remains alive, he said, people will continue believing Salih. Another nodded. The miracle strengthens him every day. A third looked toward the distant valley where the She-Camel often rested. It is not Salih we must remove first. It is the sign. Silence followed. Because every person present understood what those words truly meant. The heart before the action. Before any great wrongdoing is committed. It is first accepted inside the heart. Human beings rarely wake up one morning prepared to commit enormous crimes. Instead, conscience is weakened little by little. Wrong choices become easier. Pride grows stronger. Mercy becomes smaller. Until eventually, what once seemed impossible feels reasonable. The conspirators had traveled that path. The miracle no longer inspired reflection. It inspired resentment. The believers continue their lives. While the conspirators planned in secret, the believers continued their ordinary lives. Families gathered for evening meals. Children played beneath the carved cliffs. Some quietly spoke about Allah's blessings. Others expressed hope that more people would soon accept the truth. They did not know what was unfolding in hidden places. This has always been part of history. Good people often continue serving quietly, unaware that evil is organizing nearby. Salih's continuing invitation. Despite growing opposition, Salih, never abandoned his mission. Every day he reminded his people, "My people, seek forgiveness from your Lord. Turn back to Him. His mercy is greater than your mistakes." He did not speak with hatred. He did not insult those who rejected him. Even now, after witnessing arrogance, mockery, and resistance, his invitation remained open. This reflects one of the beautiful characteristics shared by the prophets. They hoped for guidance until the very end. The camel walks peacefully. The she-camel herself showed no sign of fear. She continued walking peacefully through the valleys. She approached the well on her appointed day. She rested beneath the cliffs during the afternoon heat. Children still watched from a respectful distance. Travelers still marveled at her presence. Every movement became another reminder that Allah's promise had already been fulfilled. The miracle was alive. Visible. Undeniable. Yet miracles alone cannot force belief. Faith requires willingness. The leaders grow more desperate. The chiefs of the mud noticed something disturbing. The miracle had not disappeared with time. Instead, people had become accustomed to it. The she-camel had become part of everyday life. And that frightened them even more. Because constant reminders are difficult to ignore. One leader finally said, "If we do nothing, our authority will slowly disappear." Power built upon pride often fears truth more than violence. Truth changes hearts. And changed hearts reshape societies. The moment before history changed. There are moments in every story when time itself seems to slow. Everything leading to that point feels like preparation. The valley slept peacefully. The stars filled the sky. The desert remained calm. But somewhere beyond the cliffs, the conspirators made their final decision. The Quran tells us they resolved to carry out their plan. Not because evidence was lacking. Not because the miracle had failed. But because pride had overcome reason. Sometimes people reject truth not because they cannot recognize it, but because accepting it requires humility. A lesson about free will. The story of the mud reminds us that Allah grants human beings choice. The people were not forced to reject Salih. Nor were they forced to obey him. The miracle clarified the truth. The decision remained theirs. This is one of the central themes running throughout the Quran. Guidance is shown. The path becomes clear. Then every soul chooses. And every choice carries consequences. The difference between doubt and arrogance. There is an important difference between sincere doubt and arrogant rejection. A sincere person asks questions because they seek understanding. An arrogant person asks questions only to avoid changing. The chiefs of the mud had already witnessed the miracle. Their problem was no longer uncertainty. It was unwillingness. Their hearts had decided long before their actions followed. The night of decision. The moon rose high above the desert. Its pale light illuminated the towering cliffs carved by generations of craftsmen. The stone city appeared peaceful. No ordinary observer would have guessed that history stood only hours away from changing forever. The she-camel rested quietly. The believers slept with hope. Salih, a.s., continued placing his trust in Allah. And the conspirators moved silently through the darkness. Each step carried them closer to a decision that could never be undone. Not merely the killing of an animal, but open rebellion against a sign sent directly by Allah. The silence before dawn. As the night slowly gave way to the first hint of dawn, the valley remained unusually still. No wind disturbed the sand. No voices echoed between the cliffs. Nature itself seemed to pause. Because sometimes, the quietest moments in history come immediately before the loudest consequences. The people of the mud still had time to turn back. One confession. One act of repentance. One moment of humility. Could have changed everything. But pride had become stronger than wisdom. And the sun that would soon rise over the mountains would witness the beginning of the end. The dawn that changed everything. Morning arrived quietly. The first rays of sunlight stretched across the towering sandstone cliffs, painting them with shades of amber, crimson, and gold. A gentle breeze moved through the narrow valleys. Birds circled high above the mountains. From a distance, the city looked as peaceful as it always had. Merchants prepared to open their shops. Stonecutters gathered their tools. Children ran through the streets carved into the rock. Life appeared unchanged. But beneath the calm surface, the events of the previous night had already begun to reshape history. Some decisions cannot be undone. Some moments divide time itself. There is life before them. And life after them. The people of the mud had reached such a moment. The conspirators leave the shadows. The Quran tells us that the people ultimately hamstrung the She-Camel, an act of deliberate violence against the miraculous sign that Allah had entrusted to them. Classical Islamic historians mention that one individual carried out the fatal blow after being encouraged and supported by others. The Quran emphasizes something even more important than the identity of the attacker. It repeatedly attributes the act to the people of the mud as a whole, because they accepted, approved of, or failed to stop the crime. This is a profound lesson. Sometimes a society shares responsibility not only for what it does, but also for what it willingly allows. The camel walks without fear. The miraculous She-Camel had never harmed anyone. She continued following the command given by Allah. She drank from the well on her appointed day. She wandered peacefully through the valley. She became a familiar sight among the towering cliffs. She had no reason to fear the people. She did not know that jealousy had grown stronger than gratitude. She did not know that pride had become stronger than reason. She did not know that mercy was about to be rejected. The great sin. Then came the moment. The Quran describes it with remarkable brevity. The people hamstrung the She-Camel. The act itself was simple. Its consequences were enormous. This was never about an animal. It was about rebellion against Allah after receiving unmistakable evidence. The miracle had answered their challenge. The command had been clear. The warning had been repeated. Yet they chose defiance. History often remembers dramatic battles. But some of humanity's greatest turning points happen in moments that appear surprisingly small. One decision. One act. One choice. And an entire civilization changes forever. The silence that followed. Imagine the valley after the deed had been done. The wind continued moving across the desert. The cliffs stood unchanged. The sun continued shining. Nature itself carried on. But among the believers, a heavy silence settled. Something precious had been lost. Not merely the life of the She-Camel, but the opportunity that Allah had placed before the people. The miracle they demanded had been answered with violence. Salih, A.S., learns the news. When Salih, A.S., learned what had happened, his heart was filled with sorrow. Not because Allah had been defeated. Allah is never defeated. Not because the miracle had failed. The miracle had already fulfilled its purpose. His sadness came from something else. He knew what this meant for his people. He had warned them. He had pleaded with them. He had reminded them again and again. Now they had crossed a line from which there would be no return unless Allah willed otherwise. A prophet does not rejoice at the downfall of his people. He grieves for them. The final warning. After the killing of the She-Camel, Salih, A.S., delivered one final warning. The Quran records its meaning clearly. He told them, "Enjoy yourselves in your homes for 3 days. That is a promise not to be denied. 3 days. Not 3 years. Not 3 months. Only 3 days remained." Imagine hearing such words. Imagine knowing that your nation's future had been reduced to 72 hours. This was not spoken in anger. It was spoken as the final declaration after countless opportunities had already been given. Mercy before judgment. One of the remarkable themes throughout the Quran is that Allah's mercy always comes before His punishment. The people of the mud were not destroyed immediately after rejecting Salih. They received reminders, arguments, warnings, a miracle, time to reflect. Then, even after killing the She-Camel, they were given 3 more days. Not because Allah needed time, but because His justice is perfect. No one would later be able to claim, "We were never warned." The reactions of the people. The valley responded in different ways. The believers felt sadness and concern. Some prayed constantly. Some prepared to leave with Salih. Some wept for relatives who still refused to believe. Among the disbelievers, however, reactions varied. Some laughed. Some dismissed the warning. Others pretended nothing unusual had happened. A few may have felt fear deep inside their hearts. Yet pride prevented them from admitting it. Arrogance often traps people. It convinces them that changing their minds would appear weak. In reality, humility is one of the greatest forms of strength. The first day. The first day passed. The sun rose. The markets opened. Families continued their routines. Outwardly, life appeared almost normal. But beneath the surface, every passing hour carried weight. Classical Islamic narrations mention signs appearing on the faces of the people during these 3 days. These details are found in traditional historical reports rather than explicitly in the Quran itself. What the Quran makes absolutely clear is that the warning had been given. Time was running out. And the promise of Allah would not fail. The believers prepare. The followers of Salih trusted Allah completely. They did not know every detail of what would happen. But they believed His promise. Faith often requires trust before understanding. They gathered their families. They strengthened one another. They remembered previous nations, especially the people of Ad. History was repeating itself. Another civilization had received clear guidance. Another civilization had rejected it. Another civilization now stood at the edge of judgment. The plot against Salih. The Quran reveals another shocking detail. Even after killing the She-Camel and receiving the final warning, some conspirators planned an even greater crime. They secretly agreed to attack Salih himself and his family during the night. Then they intended to deny responsibility. This reveals how deeply corruption had entered their hearts. When people continually reject truth, sin rarely remains the same size. It grows. One wrongdoing leads to another. Darkness invites deeper darkness. Allah's protection. But Allah's plan is always greater than the plans of those who oppose Him. The Quran tells us that while they plotted against Salih, Allah planned against them. And Allah is the best of planners. Their conspiracy never achieved its purpose. The very people who imagined they controlled events had forgotten something essential. Human beings can make plans. But the outcome always belongs to Allah. The valley waits. As the second day approached, an unusual stillness settled over the land. The towering cliffs remained silent. The wells reflected the clear desert sky. Even the wind seemed softer than usual. Sometimes nature appears peaceful immediately before extraordinary events. The people of the mud stood at the threshold of history. They still breathed. They still walked their streets. They still lived inside magnificent homes carved from stone. But time was almost finished. 3 days. Then 2. Soon only one would remain. And after that, The promise of Allah would arrive. A lesson for every generation. The story of the She-Camel is not merely about a miracle. It teaches that evidence alone does not change a person. The people saw. They understood. Yet many refused to submit. Modern people often ask, if I witnessed a miracle, I would surely believe. The story of the mud gently reminds us. The greatest obstacle to faith is rarely a lack of evidence. More often, it is the unwillingness of the heart. The second dawn. The second sunrise after the killing of the miraculous She-Camel arrived without fanfare. The eastern horizon slowly brightened. Golden light crept across the sandstone cliffs. Long shadows stretched through the narrow valleys. From a distance, the kingdom of the mud still looked magnificent. Its mountain homes stood exactly where they had always stood. Its towers remained firm. Its carved entrances reflected the morning light with remarkable beauty. Nothing in the landscape suggested that an entire civilization was living through its final hours. Yet beneath the calm appearance, every heartbeat carried the weight of the warning that Prophet Salih, a.s., had delivered. 3 days. The first had already passed. Only 2 remained. The weight of waiting. Few experiences are more difficult than waiting. Especially when the future is uncertain. Among the believers, every passing hour deepened both their faith and their sadness. They trusted Allah's promise. But they also mourned for friends, neighbors, relatives, people they had grown up beside. The prophets never desired punishment for their nations. Neither did those who truly believed. The believers hoped that somehow, some final act of repentance might still occur. The hearts of the arrogant, the chiefs of the mud reacted differently. Outwardly, they laughed. Some mocked Salih openly. Others continued their daily routines as though nothing had happened. Yet arrogance often hides fear. Deep inside, many could not completely ignore what they had witnessed. They remembered the miracle. They remembered the impossible appearance of the She-Camel. They remembered Salih's honesty long before he became a prophet. Every attempt to silence those memories only made them stronger. Still, pride is a powerful prison. It convinces people that admitting the truth would mean admitting defeat. So they continued pretending that everything remained under their control. The failed conspiracy. The Quran tells us that the conspirators made another plan. After killing the She-Camel, they secretly decided to murder Salih, a.s., and his family during the night. Then they intended to tell the rest of the people. We know nothing about it. They believed that if the prophet disappeared, his message would disappear with him. But history has repeatedly shown the opposite. Truth does not depend upon one person's survival. It belongs to Allah. And Allah protects His message. The Quran summarizes the outcome beautifully. They planned, and we planned, while they perceived it not. Their conspiracy never succeeded. Instead, the planners themselves moved closer to the judgment they hoped to escape. The last full day. As the second day ended, an unusual quiet settled over the valley. Merchants closed their shops earlier than usual. Families remained inside their homes. Even those who mocked Salih found themselves glancing toward the sky more often. The air felt strangely still. The desert wind that normally whispered through the valleys seemed hesitant. Nature itself appeared to pause. Not because creation feared. Creation always obeys Allah. Rather, human hearts sensed that something beyond their understanding was approaching. The third morning. Then came the final day. The last sunrise the mud would ever witness. Children woke without knowing it would be their final morning. Parents prepared breakfast. Workers gathered their tools. Shepherds led animals toward grazing lands. Life continued. Just as it had for countless generations. The greatest endings rarely announce themselves with noise. They often begin with ordinary moments. Salih leaves the city. By Allah's command, Salih, as, and those who believed departed from among their people. This departure carries deep meaning. Throughout the stories of the prophets, Allah protects those who sincerely believe before judgment descends. Noah entered the ark. Lot left the cities of the plain. And now Salih guided the believers away from the mud. Imagine them climbing rocky paths beyond the valley. Looking back one final time. Seeing the magnificent city carved into the mountains. Knowing many loved ones had chosen to remain behind. Their steps must have felt unbearably heavy. Faith sometimes requires leaving behind everything familiar. A final look back. Classical Islamic tradition relates that Salih addressed his people one last time, expressing sorrow rather than triumph. The Quran records words to this effect. O my people, I certainly conveyed to you the message of my Lord and gave you sincere advice, but you do not love sincere advisers. There is no celebration in these words. No satisfaction. Only grief. The mission had been completed. The warning had been delivered. The choice had been made. The moment arrives. Then, without warning, the promise of Allah came. The Quran describes the punishment using several complementary expressions. It speaks of the mighty blast. It speaks of the earthquake. It speaks of the overwhelming cry. Classical scholars explain that these descriptions refer to different aspects of the same divine judgment. Imagine the earth suddenly trembling beneath the mountain city. Stone walls vibrating. Massive cliffs echoing with a sound unlike anything human ears had ever heard. The ground itself shaking with irresistible force. No fortress could protect against it. No mountain home could resist it. The people who believed stone would guarantee their safety discovered that all creation belongs to Allah. The silence after the blast. Then, everything stopped. The echo faded. The trembling ceased. Dust slowly settled over the valley. The carved homes still stood. Many of the buildings remained remarkably intact. But life had vanished. The bustling streets were silent. The markets stood empty. The workshops no longer echoed with the sound of chisels. The civilization that believed itself secure had disappeared in a single moment of divine command. The silence was almost unimaginable. The meaning of the ruins. One of the most striking aspects of the story of the mud is that many of their structures remained standing. Their engineering had truly been extraordinary. Their buildings endured. But the people did not. This teaches a lesson that reaches far beyond ancient Arabia. Civilizations often believe their greatest achievements are physical. Monuments. Cities. Technology. Architecture. Yet the Quran reminds us that the moral foundation of a society matters far more than the stone foundation beneath its buildings. A civilization may construct magnificent monuments, yet still collapse if pride replaces gratitude. The believers are safe. Far from the valley, Salih, and the believers remained under Allah's protection. They witnessed the aftermath with heavy hearts. No prophet rejoices over destruction. Their safety came not because they were stronger, nor because they possessed greater wealth. Their safety came because they trusted Allah. Faith had become their shelter. The lesson echoes through time. Generations passed. Empires rose and fell. Trade routes shifted. New civilizations appeared. The story of the mud became history. Then legend. Then memory. Yet the Quran preserved it with perfect clarity. Not merely to describe what happened, but to ask every future generation a question. What truly protects a civilization? Is it wealth? Military power? Technology? Magnificent architecture? Or is it justice? Humility? Gratitude? And obedience to the one who created all things? The desert keeps its secrets. Centuries later, travelers crossing northern Arabia would encounter abandoned rock-cut tombs and ancient settlements. Wind would whistle through empty doorways. Sand would gather along forgotten paths. The mountains would remain exactly where they had always stood. Patient. Silent. Watching generation after generation pass. To many travelers, they were simply ruins. To those who knew the story, they were reminders. Not of human greatness alone, but of human responsibility. A quiet reflection. As the sun set over the empty valley for the first time after the destruction, the cliffs glowed with the same beautiful colors they had displayed for centuries. Nature remained beautiful. The mountains remained majestic. Only humanity had changed. The valley that once echoed with laughter, trade, and ambition had become one of history's quietest classrooms. Its lesson continues to whisper across the centuries. Strength without humility becomes weakness. Prosperity without gratitude becomes arrogance. And every blessing carries responsibility. The desert never forgets. Thousands of years have passed since the people of the mud disappeared. Kings have ruled and vanished. Empires have expanded and collapsed. Languages have evolved. Trade routes have shifted across continents. Yet the deserts of northern Arabia remain. The winds still move through narrow valleys. The sandstone cliffs still glow crimson beneath the setting sun. The stars still fill the night sky with the same breathtaking beauty witnessed by generations long gone. Nature remembers. Not through words, but through silence. The silence of places where history once unfolded. A traveler arrives. Imagine yourself as a traveler crossing Arabia centuries after the destruction of the mud. For days you have ridden across endless plains. The desert stretches in every direction. Heat shimmers above the sand. Then, suddenly, the mountains appear. Tall. Majestic. Golden beneath the afternoon sun. As you move closer, something unexpected catches your eye. Perfectly carved doorways. Elegant windows. Massive facades rising directly from solid stone. At first glance, they appear inhabited. Yet no smoke rises from the rooftops. No laughter fills the streets. No merchants call from the marketplace. Only silence remains. It is a silence that invites questions. Who built these places? Why were they abandoned? What happened to the people who once called them home? The memory preserved in the Quran. Without the Quran, many civilizations mentioned within its pages might have faded into legend. The Quran preserves the memory of the mud not to satisfy curiosity, but to preserve wisdom. Again and again, the Quran invites readers to travel through the earth. To observe. To reflect. To ask. What happened to those who came before? History becomes a mirror. Every generation sees itself reflected within it. The story of the mud is not locked in the past. It speaks to every age. Archaeology and the story of the mud. Today, archaeologists continue studying ancient settlements across northern Arabia. One of the most famous locations is Al-Hijr, also known as Mada'in Salih. Its magnificent rock-cut monuments attract visitors from around the world. It is important to distinguish between history and revelation. The surviving monumental tombs at Mada'in Salih are primarily associated with the Nabatean kingdom, which flourished many centuries after Prophet Salih, a.s. However, ancient inscriptions and historical traditions indicate that the broader region was inhabited long before the Nabateans, and classical Islamic tradition associates the land with the mud. This distinction matters. Faith should never require us to ignore historical evidence. Likewise, archaeology cannot always answer every question preserved in Revelation. The two serve different purposes. One studies physical remains. The other preserves divine guidance. The journey of the Prophet Muhammad. Centuries after Salih, a.s., another prophet passed near the land connected with the mud. During the expedition to Tabuk, Prophet Muhammad and his companions traveled through the area traditionally associated with the people of the mud. Authentic hadith describe that the Prophet instructed his companions not to enter those abandoned dwellings lightly or merely for entertainment. He encouraged reflection and humility. Some narrations mention that he advised entering such places only while remembering Allah and contemplating the fate of those who had rejected his guidance. This moment is deeply meaningful. Even centuries later, the ruins remained a lesson. Not a tourist attraction. A reminder. Stone can outlive its builders. Perhaps the greatest irony in the story of the mud lies in their architecture. They carved homes into mountains because they believed stone would protect them. And in one sense, it did. Their buildings survived. Many still stand today. But buildings cannot save souls. Walls cannot replace righteousness. Mountains cannot shield those who knowingly reject truth. The people disappeared. The stones remained. History sometimes preserves monuments, only to remind future generations of forgotten mistakes. What was the real miracle? Many people assume the greatest miracle in the story is the She-Camel. Indeed, it was extraordinary. But perhaps the deeper miracle was something else. The mercy of Allah. Consider everything he gave the people of the mud. A prosperous civilization. Remarkable intelligence. Engineering skill. Natural resources. A respected prophet from among themselves. Clear warnings. An undeniable miracle. Time to repent. Even after rejecting the miracle. 3 additional days before judgment. How patient is the Creator with his creation. The story is not merely about punishment. It is about extraordinary mercy offered again and again. The danger of pride. Every civilization develops confidence. Confidence itself is not evil. Without confidence, people would never build. Never explore. Never discover. The danger begins when confidence transforms into arrogance. When people begin believing they no longer need guidance. No longer need gratitude. No longer need their Creator. The Quran repeatedly presents this as the turning point for many nations. Not only the mud, but Ad, Pharaoh, and countless others. The lesson remains timeless. Success should produce humility, not pride. A message beyond time. The story of Prophet Salih, a.s., is often read as ancient history. Yet its themes feel remarkably modern. Human beings still celebrate technology. Still admire impressive architecture. Still pursue wealth. Still compete for influence. None of these pursuits are inherently wrong. The question remains the same as it was thousands of years ago. Will success lead us toward gratitude? Or away from it? Will knowledge increase humility? Or arrogance? History changes. Human nature changes very little. The Prophet's success. Some readers ask. If most of the mud rejected Salih, did he fail? The Quran gives a completely different answer. A prophet's success is never measured by the number of followers. His duty is to deliver the message faithfully. Salih completed that duty perfectly. The responsibility for belief rested upon the people themselves. This offers comfort to anyone who strives to do what is right. You are responsible for sincerity, not for controlling outcomes. Those belong to Allah. The believers continue. Although the civilization of the mud ended, faith itself continued. The believers who followed Salih survived by Allah's mercy. They carried the memory of what they had witnessed. They told future generations about the miracle, about the warnings, about the She-Camel, about the importance of obeying Allah before pride blinds the heart. History continued. Prophets would continue to come. Humanity's journey was far from over. A quiet evening in the desert. Imagine one final scene. The sun slowly disappears beyond the western horizon. The cliffs glow with soft shades of crimson, amber, and gold. A cool evening breeze replaces the day's intense heat. The valley is completely silent. No voices. No markets. No celebrations. Only the gentle whisper of the desert wind. Above, countless stars begin appearing one by one. The same stars that watched the rise of the mud. The same stars that witnessed the mission of Salih. The same stars we still see today. History feels distant, yet strangely close. Because every generation stands before similar choices. Truth or pride. Gratitude or arrogance. Humility or self-sufficiency. The names change. The lesson remains. Final reflection. If there is one message carried through every chapter of this story, perhaps it is this. Civilizations are remembered not only for what they build, but for what they believe. Stone eventually weathers. Empires eventually fade. Treasures eventually disappear. But sincere faith, acts of righteousness, and humble hearts leave a legacy that outlives every monument. Perhaps that is why the Quran preserved the story of the mud. Not to frighten humanity, but to guide it. Not to celebrate destruction, but to celebrate the mercy that always comes before judgment. Closing words. As our journey through the story of Prophet Salih, comes to an end, we leave behind the valleys of ancient Arabia with more than historical memories. We leave carrying timeless questions. How do we respond to blessings? How do we treat truth when it challenges our pride? And what kind of legacy will we leave behind? The mountains of the mud still stand. Their builders do not. But the lessons of their story continue to echo across the centuries for anyone willing to listen. Thank you for spending this quiet journey with Sleepless historian Salavora. Until our next story, may your evening be peaceful, your heart reflective, and your rest undisturbed. Good night.